They said they needed space, that they weren't ready, that you were asking for something they couldn't give. But the truth is, you weren't asking for anything more than what they promised with their presence. You didn't chase them with expectations. You met them with patience. You gave your attention without conditions. And when they grew distant, cold, or sarcastically aloof, you leaned in with understanding instead of anger. But they still pushed you away, slowly, subtly, until you could feel yourself becoming a stranger in your own connection. Until you began to question if maybe you were asking for too much. If maybe your calm, steady love was too loud for someone who only knows how to feel safe in silence. But here's the twist no one tells you. It's not when you gave too much that broke them. It's when you finally stopped. When you went quiet. When you no longer asked where they'd gone. When you let the conversation stay unfinished. Let the phone ring unanswered. Let the absence speak for itself. That's when the fracture began. Not in you, but in them. Because someone like you isn't easy to replace. Not just because you loved them, but because you understood them. You saw through the walls they built. You heard what they meant when they didn't say anything at all. You noticed the subtle shifts in tone, the hidden hesitations, the fragile ego behind their indifference. And still, you stayed until you couldn't. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself, too. And now, in the quiet that remains, they're not okay. They may look fine. They may seem detached. They may post photos and act as if you were just another passing phase. But inside, they are haunted. Haunted by the way you spoke, the way you didn't flinch, the way your voice didn't rise to match their coldness, but remained steady, clear, present, the way you didn't demand love. You offered it. And when it wasn't received, you didn't beg. You walked. That's the part that breaks them. Because they never imagined someone like you could leave. They thought the bond you felt would hold you hostage. That your empathy would keep you explaining, fixing, proving your love. But you proved it once, through your presence. And you proved it again, through your absence. And now they're left with the truth. You weren't asking for too much. You were the rare one who actually knew how to love them. And they pushed that away. So the question becomes, why would someone sabotage the one connection that felt real? Why do avoidants reject the love they secretly crave, only to fall apart when it's gone? And why do they never admit it? That's what we're about to uncover. The hidden psychology of why they push away what they crave. To understand why they pushed you away, you have to go deeper than their words. Deeper than their excuses about not being ready or needing space. Because those aren't explanations. They're defenses. They didn't pull away because they didn't feel something. They pulled away because they felt too much. Avoidant attachment isn't about not needing connection. It's about not knowing what to do when connection feels real. Because real love, the kind that stays calm when things get messy, the kind that doesn't demand a performance, the kind that reflects your inner world back to you with compassion. That kind of love is terrifying for someone who learned that closeness equals pain. Most avoidants were never taught how to sit with emotional discomfort. As children, they may have been dismissed, overcorrected, or told to be strong instead of being held. Love came with conditions. Be quiet, be impressive, be low maintenance, be useful. So they adapted. They learned to self-soothe by detaching. They stopped asking to be seen. They replaced their need for intimacy with a need for control. And then you showed up. You didn't try to control them. You tried to know them. You offered a mirror, one that didn't criticize, but reflected. And for a moment, they saw themselves. Not the mask they wear in relationships, not the version of themselves they carefully curate, but the truth, their unhealed wounds, their emotional defensiveness, their inability to receive love without bracing for loss. That kind of mirror can't be tolerated for long by someone still trapped in survival mode. So they did what they always do. They shut down. They rationalized. They told themselves you were too much, too sensitive, too demanding, because it's easier to blame you than to face the part of themselves that still believes love isn't safe. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that's exactly what they did. They avoided you, to avoid themselves. Because when you communicated clearly, they felt exposed. When you held space, they felt emotionally naked. When you showed up fully, it forced them to confront how often they're only half present in their own life. They weren't rejecting you. They were rejecting the self they don't know how to live with. That's why they pulled away. Because your love didn't just comfort them. It challenged them. It challenged their stories about themselves. It challenged the belief that no one stays. It challenged the lie that they don't need anyone. And that kind of challenge doesn't lead to gratitude. It leads to panic. So they did what they always do when connection gets too close. They disconnected. But this time, something's different. This time, the person they pushed away wasn't another reenactment of their past. This time, they pushed away someone who saw them. And now that person is gone. The unraveling. What happens inside them when you leave? First, they feel relieved. Yes, relieved. Because distance, for them, is familiar. It's where they feel safest. No demands. No vulnerability. No emotional exposure. They convinced themselves they made the right call. That losing you was a necessary step toward clarity or freedom. That they just needed peace. But what they don't realize is that peace and numbness feel almost identical at first. So they distract themselves. They keep busy. They scroll. They socialize. They post. They lean into the illusion of indifference like it's armor. But something begins to shift. Quietly. Gradually. Because the kind of love you offered wasn't loud, chaotic, or demanding. It was stabilizing. And when stabilizing love disappears, the nervous system eventually notices. Not right away, but when the noise dies down, when the excitement wears off, when they finally sit with themselves and there's nothing left to resist. That's when the unraveling begins. They start to notice little things, not romantic things, but regulating things. The way your voice softened them when they were stressed. The way your presence reminded them to slow down. The way you saw through their walls and stayed anyway. And now, without that, they feel off. Not shattered, not hysterical, but emotionally adrift. Like something is missing and they can't quite name it. So they try to replace it. A new conversation, a new distraction, a new person even. But it doesn't work. Because you weren't just a person. You were an experience, a mirror, a lesson. They start thinking about the things they never said, the messages they left on read, the way they pulled away when they should have leaned in, the way you stayed calm when they became cold, and how you left with grace, not drama. That's what starts to haunt them. Because most people leave with anger. You left with dignity, and that's far harder to forget. They don't cry where anyone can see. They don't talk about it openly. They probably won't text you at 2 a.m. saying they miss you. But they do. They miss the version of themselves they were becoming in your presence. They miss the way you made them feel seen and safe. They miss the emotional steadiness they could never give themselves, but felt when they were near you. And it terrifies them. Because if they admit that they miss you, they'd have to admit they destroyed something that actually mattered. Something they'll likely never get again. So they pretend. They pretend they're fine. They pretend they don't remember. They pretend it wasn't that deep. But it was. And their body knows. Their nervous system knows. Their dreams know, because no matter how much they try to forget, they can't unfeel the feeling of being loved without needing to earn it. And now that it's gone, they're unraveling quietly, silently, in ways they'll never admit, because the truth is too heavy. And it sounds a lot like this. I had something real, and I pushed it away. The voice that lingers, why you're the one they can't forget. It's not your face that haunts them. It's your voice, the way you spoke when things were hard, the way your tone didn't spike when they withdrew, the way you knew when to hold space and when to let go. They can't forget it, because most people react. Most people beg. Most people try to fix. But you didn't. You responded with something far more disarming. Emotional intelligence. That's the part that lingers. Not the gifts. Not the memories. Not even the intimacy. It's the emotional presence. The way you didn't flinch when their wounds showed up. The way you didn't punish them for needing space. The way you could feel the shift in energy before they even said a word. And instead of panicking, you simply asked, what's going on beneath that silence? You saw them, not just the image they projected, but the self behind the mask. And that's something they're not used to, because for most of their life, they've worn armor. They've been the avoider, the independent one, the emotionally unavailable one. But you didn't see them as distant. You saw them as guarded. And that difference broke through something ancient inside of them. The truth? You spoke to the part of them that still believes in love. The part they've hidden. The part they silenced. The part that once longed to be chosen, but learned, over time, to survive without ever being met fully. And for a moment, you met them. You weren't perfect, but you were real. And that reality didn't just feel good. It felt safe. That's why they can't stop hearing your voice in quiet moments. Why your words return in situations where they once would have shut down. Why your silence now echoes louder than your presence ever did. Because you didn't leave a gap. You left a standard. You didn't just show them affection. You showed them what secure love sounds like. And now, everything else feels hollow in comparison. They try to move on. They meet new people. They keep things light. They avoid depth because depth now reminds them of you. But their nervous system remembers. It remembers the calm. It remembers the grace. It remembers the feeling of being safe, even when they didn't know how to ask for it. That's the part they'll never say out loud, because to admit it would require a level of self-awareness they're only just beginning to develop. But in the quiet, when the distractions fade, when they lie awake wondering why connection feels so far away now, your voice returns, not to taunt them, not to shame them, but to remind them of what they had and what they weren't yet ready to receive. The real power, why you walking away was their awakening. You didn't walk away to make a point. You didn't leave to punish them. You left because staying meant betraying yourself. And that's the part they never saw coming. Because they thought your depth meant dependency, that your emotional presence meant you'd always be available, that no matter how many times they pushed you away, you'd come back. But what they didn't realize is that real love doesn't beg to stay. It offers itself, openly, honestly, and fully. But when it's met with fear, silence, or self-sabotage, it knows when to let go. And that letting go, that's what shook them. Not a dramatic exit, not angry words, just absence, silence, space. Because avoidants are used to being chased, they're used to setting the emotional terms, to controlling the pace of connection. But for the first time, someone chose themselves without making a scene. And in that moment, something cracked. Because whether they admit it or not, your departure made them feel the very thing they spent years avoiding. Loss. The loss of being understood. The loss of safety without control. The loss of a connection that didn't ask them to perform. And most haunting of all, the loss of the one person who actually saw them and didn't run. Until now, that's when the real awakening begins. Not the kind where they come running back, flowers in hand, apologizing for everything. That's a fantasy. The real awakening happens in silence, in the mirror, in the moment they realized that they were the one who couldn't meet love. Not because love wasn't present, but because their wounds were still louder than their longing. Your walking away didn't just end a relationship, it revealed their pattern. You became the emotional contrast they can't forget. You set a standard their soul still remembers. And now, every connection feels like a ghost of what they once had. They don't say this out loud. They don't text it. They don't post about it. But in the quiet corners of their mind, they replay your words. They remember the safety they took for granted. And they feel a heaviness they can't shake. Because you weren't just someone who loved them. You were someone who loved them consciously. And that kind of love leaves a mark, one they'll never fully erase, no matter how far they run. And if this spoke to something you've lived through, if you've ever loved someone who couldn't hold what you offered, and you're healing in silence now, you're not alone. Let this be your reminder. You were never too much. You were simply too conscious for someone still afraid of their own depth. Subscribe if you're on this journey back to self-worth. And share this with someone who needs to hear it today.